Hey, babies. Hey, babies, hey, babies. Hey, babies, babies. Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. What's up? How we doing today?
Good. Got Bobby Wagner coming back, baby. First
Yes,
first big move.
sir.
First big
Yes,
move.
sir. Yes, sir. Yeah, Callow's like, just do football. He's learned his lesson. Just do football here. That's where this place is. I'm going to get to that in a bit because I asked you all for feedback about what we should do here, which I'm just being honest about it. What do you want? And vast majority said football. So you're going to get what you want from here forward, which I will address later. But let's start with what you want to hear from me about football. And I'll get to Bobby in a moment. Wheels up, guys. Trey Hendrickson's available. Myles Garrett's situation is ugly now, and Cleveland needs to figure out how that's going to play out before he gets traded. Apparently, the reporting is that he tried to contact the owner of the team to try to convince him to trade him, and the owner won't return his calls at this point. So that one's kind of stuck in neutral for a while. And honestly, with Joey Bosa available, Khalil Mack available, now Trey Hendrickson available, the price point on someone like Myles Garrett is going to go down because the teams that are going to want someone like him would probably pay the premium now. And that's before they actually fill the hole that is going to be made here. On Hendrickson specifically, wheels up, guys. You know, I thought maybe this was the Debo trade was the last trade this team would make. I think to acquire Hendrickson, you will have to trade for him. He will not hit free agency. And co-sign me with everyone else who believes that Washington should go after him as long as the price isn't outrageous. He led the league in sacks a year ago. He's got what they call that great motor. I was trying to think about how, like, when we got ready to play Cincinnati last year, what I thought about him. And I remember there were a couple of things that I thought you could take advantage of, but he is one of the best pure pass rushers in the NFL right now. This is a massive, massive upgrade for them. It's an enormous hole for them. Let's go. Like, I think this is the target over the weekend to try to get him before free agency rolls around.
And this is one that I think, because I think he's on the same level as Myles Garrett. I think Myles Garrett is better. Like, don't get me wrong here, but they're in the same tier. He was number 2 in voting for Defensive Player of the Year last year. What I will say, though, too, is the urgency is there for the Bengals and not for the Browns, too. So I don't feel like you have to blow them away with some kind of package. This has to be like a legitimate negotiation, where for Garrett, it was like, how many first-round picks are you giving up? With this one, it's, well, they can't pay Higgins. They can't pay Chase. They can't pay him, too. They have to kind of get rid of him. This seems like an easier get overall.
Yeah, I mean, if the price point is something in the neighborhood of like a third round pick this year and maybe a lower round pick next year, something like that, that's completely, utterly palatable to me. And it's also like pretty obvious that they're going to have to pay him and extend him. He is 30, so they'll have to figure out what, what the length of that deal is. But you know what the annual average value is going to be. You just saw it with Max Crosby. So it's going to be something in that neighborhood. It's just a massive void on the team. And the price point to acquire Garrett, to me, when Cleveland comes around to assuming Garrett's serious and, plays this out throughout the spring and summer, I think the price point's going to be a lot higher than that. I don't know if it's realistic to get it, but I think the price point's going to be a lot higher than that for them to actually part ways with him. And as I said yesterday, I really feel like that the reason he's going to get traded is Abdul Carter's going to fall in their lap. And when he does, that's his replacement. And that will give them the opportunity to trade him. But that needs to play out first. And they need to get over themselves about how they're going to hold him hostage. But with Hendrickson, he is now fully available. I'm hoping the price point is not a first round pick. I don't think that's what I'd want to give up for him. But I'm in the midst of let's go here. Like, this team can take on full salary. They can bring him in. They can provide the cap relief entirely to Cincinnati. If the price point is something in the neighborhood of a third round pick, let's go. This is a massive, massive upgrade to this team. And I saw the people, list them as a team that's going to be interested in him. Of course, they're going to be interested in him. This is one of what I think are the two biggest needs on the team. And hopefully something happens over the weekend. Make me happy.
The other part about this, too, is like, it is worth saying they're picking what, 28th, 29th in the draft, I think it is at this point.
29.
Like, you're not getting a Hendrickson at that pick. Like,
no, but if I don't feel like that pick is necessary, and I would like to actually, if we're going to give up more draft capital now, I would like to keep that to either trade back and get some of the draft picks back, or use it on an offensive lineman because it's going to be necessitated at that point.
Sure, but I would say, like, if it's a first this year and a second or a third, let's not say second, let's say a third or a fourth next year, I'm all right with that. Like, that's going to be painful, but I'm willing to do that. I think he's that good, and the price point right now is going to be better. Like I said, I think Garrett was how many first-round picks? I think Hendrickson, you could get it done for at most a first and some fluff thrown in. I'm kind of in on this one.
Yeah, I think it's an at most. I kind of feel like it's going to land at a second or third round pick and maybe one for next year. And at that point, I'm giving up my third round pick for him and not even thinking twice about it.
Yeah.
And, because you're going to end up paying him as well. And it gives the cap relief to Cincinnati that they're looking for. Side story to this is when Joe Burrow freaks, because he will. T. Higgins hasn't gotten paid yet. They've just slapped a tag on him. Chase hasn't gotten paid yet. So that's getting weird. I'm assuming they're going to, but they just need to make him the highest paid receiver in the NFL. I don't really understand what the problem is. Like, he is the best receiver in the NFL, or he's one of them. And at the age that he's at, that's what you have to do. If they're just not in that business, then I'm waiting for Burrow to freak out and basically say, I need to get out of here because you're not going to keep the good players. He stumped for them at Radio Row to say, we want all these guys back. And even like laid out the example of the Eagles going, they pay their guys. Like, what's our problem? And the Bengals don't. And so they're letting the best defensive player they have walk on a defense that was stripped down without their same defensive coordinator. Now they've gotten worse. Jermaine Pratt has already asked for a trade because they're clearly not going to pay him. So T. Higgins has been asking for money. They won't give it to him. They might as well trade him. Like, they're ripping their team apart. Like, completely. Like, teams like Baltimore, Cleveland, and Pittsburgh have got to be happy about what's happening there. That should be a monster for another 5 years. And instead, they've gone the cheap route and can't figure out a way to keep their team together. Whatever. Their loss is our benefit. This is the guy. In my opinion, like, I'd love for them to get Myles Garrett. I just think it's too complicated. He's available. Go get him. So that's what I'm advocating for this weekend. You could solve a humongous issue by acquiring this guy.
No, and to your point about like the rest of the division, it's like, of course, like the Bengals have always been known as that organization that can never really figure it out in their front office. You and I know this. Like, it's a notoriously cheap organization. God forbid they got a bunch of talent and they need to pay them. That's their worst case scenario, because we kind of know the attitude with that franchise that they don't pay their players, or they don't kind of take care of their cap in the same way. I was looking at their salary cap yesterday during my show. Burrow, Chase, and Higgins already take up 25% of their salary cap.
Yeah.
Already. Like, right now. That's with the franchise tag. That's going to be more because they're going to give Chase more money and Higgins more money because of the way that they're going to lay the deals out. Because
on a franchise tag, you're paying top 5 salary. If you give somebody a long-term deal, you spread it out and you lower the cap number. That's how it works. But they don't want to put the cash outlay out. That's what they don't want to do. They don't want to hand somebody $50 million. That's what they don't want to do.
Right. And like, Burrow's actually a deal. I looked at his cap hit. He's like $40 million. Like, that might be one of the best contracts in the NFL with his cap hit there. But what I'm getting at is that's already 25% of their cap. That's going to go up to a third of their cap if they extend both of those guys. And now you're just looking to outscore teams 40 to, 32 or something, because you don't have a defense now either. Good luck with all that. Yeah. The rest of that division is going, cool. You guys don't know how to build a roster. Good for you guys.
The other thing, too, that's really happened here is all of a sudden the market is really flooded. I mean, for like a month, I keep looking at that free agent list and I go, who exactly is Washington going to go after that you're like, go swing for the fences? For who? Like, what are we talking about here? There were some good receivers. I'll get to them in a little bit. But, like, that's it. And they went after one of them, and they got one of them. And I assume they're going to sign another, next week off of the free agency pile. And, more and more and more, if Cooper Kupp is actually available and you don't have to trade for him, he rises up the list of somebody that I would want when he's free and clear, depending on what kind of contract he wants. Chris Godwin, who does not have a deal with the Buccaneers right now, if he were to hit the open market, like all of a sudden, I just want to know, he probably wants a lot of money. That's probably the problem. But like, so we'll have to see with him. Darius Slade, like there's a lot of players that are going to pop up that I think are available, but it was all those other positions, edge rusher, offensive line, the obvious needs that this team has. And I kept looking at the list of players going, who am I spending all the money on? I can't even name the player that I'd be like, you have to go try to get him or go overpay him or try to make that happen. There's none of them. All of the sudden this week, John Allen's going to be available. Cooper Kupp's going to be available. Trey Hendrickson just became available. DK Metcalf became available. Joey Bosa just became available. Like all of the sudden, this is turning into a real boomer bust type of next couple of weeks. And we'll see what happens this weekend because I think there's going to be a flurry of trades. I think DK is going to get traded. I think Hendrickson is going to get traded because no one's going to want him to get released and get out into the open market.
No, exactly right. And this is, once again, who's going to do the player for player trade? I'm waiting for it. Like, someone's got to have a dance partner now. Like, even if you're the Bengals, you're going, all right, what can we get to beef up the team if we trade Trey Hendrickson and we get
John Allen?
Yeah, it could be John Allen.
You just let Sheldon Rankins go. BJ Hill's a free agent. You want John Allen?
Sure. Like, that's exactly what I'm getting at here. Like, I think we are at a point here where how do you not get a player for player trade to happen at this point? Like, it baffles me. You can't tell me nobody wants a wide receiver, nobody wants a D tackle, no one wants, a linebacker or something like that, or a 3-team trade at that with some picks thrown in. Like, the NFL just for some reason doesn't like doing the player for player trades. I guess no one wants to get embarrassed, but at the same time, I'm like, there's so many dance partners. How is this not going to happen at some point over the weekend?
No, this weekend and this week got flipped upside down, which is really amazing. Like this was a whole for like literally for about a month. I just was resigned to we're not going to improve enough because we have too many holes and there's just the options are what the options are. Like you can't fill everything if the options aren't there to do it. All of the sudden, there's a lot of options at edge rusher. And if they were to solve that, whether it's Bosa or more likely and hopefully Hendrickson, because he's been healthier. I would rather have Hendrickson's been healthier. You get someone like that. Now, all of a sudden, you're looking at the draft completely differently. Now you're going, okay, let's take the best tackle or best interior offensive lineman and fill what is an obvious definitive need. In fact, I would even argue if they were able to acquire someone like Trey Hendrickson to go after back-to-back offensive linemen in the first and second round. You could get one of the best interior offensive linemen. You can definitively get one of the better tackles at the end of the first round because they're going to need at least a bridge to get by the Cosmi injury. He's probably not going to be ready for the start of the season, and we'll have to see how effective he is at all next year because of the timing of the ACL injury that he suffered. So they need to really think about 2 to 3 positions on the offensive line. I would argue that you could go, if you settle edge rusher, you could go back to back. And I don't know that they would, but you could think of it that way. And then all of a sudden this offseason feels very, very, very different.
Yeah, no, I agree. They have options now to actually fill out the roster with not just fill out the roster, but get elite talent where they are, most weak, essentially. This flipped on its head really fast this week, essentially, where it went from filling in the roster to how can you now get some playmakers at positions that you didn't have last year, really, right? Like, they got through last year, but you and I both said, like, had Fowler gone down, like, that was going to be a rough go of it because they didn't have someone that could even really fill in on the starting. Well, now we're at the point now where you get an elite starter and you can get one of those fill-ins to be the backup now. Like, the domino effect is legitimately real going into next week.
This one was a near miss for us. Christian Kirk got traded to Houston. I think it's a great trade for Houston. Diggs isn't going to be back. They tried him out for a year. He's going to end up on the open market. They had unfortunate injuries at the position. They need to get more weapons for CJ Stroud. They know the relationship he has with someone like Cliff Kingsbury. They know there's going to be a market for him the second he hits the open market, and they just jumped it and gave up a 7th-round pick to bring him in. It's a great trade, and it's one of those where I was looking at him going, he's very possible to end up here because of the relationship that he has with Kingsbury. It's very possible he would end up here, and Houston goes, no, like, we're just not going to let that happen. I thought it was a smart trade by them.
I mean, it's smart the way you depending which way you look at it. The Jaguars did trade him within the division too, and that division is always tight. Like, no one really runs away with that division at this point, and you did give it to the team that is the best one in said division. So I will say, looking at it from the Jags perspective, I was a little perplexed, but I guess you take whatever pick you can get at that point. So good for them. Kirk, though, as far as it went, like him being rumored here, I like Kirk, but he's gotten worse each year since he signed on there. So I didn't really want a part of that. I would have rather gone younger or with a better name. So good on them for getting a 7th-round pick. I'm glad he's not coming here, though.
The other one is this, like, I didn't want to trade for Cooper Kupp, but if Cooper Kupp is going to become available and it's looking like that more and more and more is going to happen, I'm interested in that too. Like, to add him to Debo and Terry would be a massive upgrade from where they are. I don't know what his price is going to be contractually. I don't know what he's going to be looking for. And the last couple of years, he's dealt with a lot of injuries. He is different than Debo. I mean, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago when they were both kind of up, and I'm like, which one would you want? They're actually very, very different players. Kupp is a precise route runner. Debo is I'm going to make a play, just get the ball in my hands. And in a broken down situation, which we could have both here, he's a master at that, where he's going to adjust, he gets the ball, and then good luck getting him down. So these are two very different players. Debo on a team like, if he has chemistry with a team like Buffalo or Baltimore, where the quarterbacks aren't necessarily on time, they're going to play a little more backyard football. He's kind of perfect for something like that. I don't think Kupp is for a team like that, because he's running precise routes that are timing oriented. And he needs a person like Stafford who's going to throw the ball on time to him to make it actually work. That's the magic of our quarterback. Our quarterback is on time, does throw accurately, but at the same time is a player who, when the play breaks down, can move around, can adjust, and can move. This to me is interesting. Like, he would fit here, in my opinion. I love that we got Debo. I don't know why we can't have both, but I do want to know what the price is on him once he does hit free agency, because we are at the point where they can't seem to find a trade partner for him.
No, I'm with you. And like, I want to see what some of the prices are going to be. You and I talked about Devontae Adams yesterday, and I said, I don't care. I'll take Adams for 1 to 2 years, because this is what you do with a young quarterback. Kupp's the same thing for me. Give him a 1 to 2. He might want a few more years. Like, he might want 3 years or something like that. Will he get that in this market? I don't know now. Like, looking at how the market is legitimately flooded with just veteran presence bodies like this, I don't know what he's going to demand, but I think the Commanders are now in a position to add a third veteran wide receiver. Like, I don't think that was possible maybe 10 days ago, but I think now, staring at what the market's going to be, they should be able to add one more if they want to. I don't know if they actually do, but they should now. And it won't, and it shouldn't break the bank either. Like, that's the crazy part here. Like, when the Debo trade is now 6 days old. I think when we saw that, we were all kind of like, okay, that's their veteran. They're going to roll it back with some other names, but not a major one. No, the way the market has now shaken out with the names that are available, I think if they want to go after one, they should be able to, no problem.
From the get-go, I said they're going to sign 2 or trade. I didn't know if they would trade or not, but they're going to get 2 players, because just look at the numbers on their roster. Terry's under contract, so is Luke McCaffrey. That's it. So just out of sheer numbers, try to bring back Zacchaeus or Crowder or Noah Brown, or a combination of them, right? Like, but I think first things first, let's upgrade the talent base. And there's going to be at least 2. I thought it would be via free agency. Instead, they did 1 via trade. Kupp only is now interesting to me if he's a free agent and we're not trading for him, which looks like it's heading that way. I'd love to have Godwin. I just think the price point's going to be very, very high. I've looked at Slayton for a while, but this was the spot in free agency that I felt like they could upgrade the position. The edge rusher and the offensive line were the ones where I'm sitting back going, I don't know how much we can do, and I think we need to be realistic about what the end game is, about what gets acquired for what would be perceived as upgrades. But this week opened the door for edge rushers in a way that I didn't anticipate, and I'm not sure anybody did. All of a sudden, really good options are available on top of the ones that were there that I think were okay. Not great choices, bridge choices, potential overpay choices, which I'll get to. Like, all of a sudden, this Hendrickson thing and Bosa thing opened the door for, oh, wait a minute. We have an option to handle something and then go back in the draft and get what we need at the other spot, which is going to be offensive line. If they can pull off a trade to get Trey Hendrickson, they need to go heavy on offensive line in the draft, period.
No, I mean, I think I was kind of saying they need to go linemen almost with their first 2 to 3 picks, no matter how this free agency class went, because they need to load up on both sides, both offensive and defensive lines. I'm perfectly fine with that. The one other thing, too, that we haven't really talked about as well is look at the market of what's blown up here. Wide receiver, edge rushers, right? Like 2 positions that they clearly need. Look at what position hasn't opened up. corner. They've got Lattimore in that. Like, it looks better and better the more they made that trade. Say what you want about Lattimore with those last couple games. I'm privy to believe that's not the Lattimore we're going to get over a 17-game season. If so, fine. Like, it's a wash. But at the same time, looking at that trade, that looks even better now for what they got him for and what they flipped already one of those picks for as well. So I just want to say, like, commend Adam Peters here. He took a good look at the market and almost like predicted how it was going to go by getting their position of need mid-season last year, going into this year by getting one of those. And now all of a sudden he's going to have the flexibility to get another wide receiver, get another edge rusher, or, you know, fill in some of those other holes.
They looked at the market then. They saw Lattimore's contract. They knew they were taking a risk on him for this past year. They were going to try to get him to play. He did. It didn't go very well. There were a couple of games where they didn't even target him. There were a bunch of games he didn't play, and there were a couple of games where he got roasted. But they knew that he's coming off injury. He's coming to a new place. It's a very difficult spot to be there. But I remember when I did the show with him back in the fall that he talked about openly. He said, we looked at the market. We don't know who's going to be available via free agency. I think if Diamador Lenore was, I think that they would have probably gone in that direction. But because he wasn't, that took that option off the board. There weren't other primary free agent corners. There's a couple decent ones, but not ones I think that they love, that they wanted to acquire. And the draft, as you're seeing now, is not littered with a bunch of Quinyon Mitchells this year. They're not. So that's why they did this. And I agree, like, it's a very good sign of how cognizant this front office was of what the market would be. They predicted it. They out-predicted it. Now, will Lattimore end up being the guy that he was pre the injuries? That's also a hope, and it's also a necessity. But when you're looking at the surveying of the market at the time, they certainly got it right, because go look at where their options are. They didn't have another corner behind Sanderstill that I think they feel really comfortable with at all on the team. They preemptively got one and ate it a little bit publicly with the way that he played at the end of the season, knowing that today we would look at this and go, well, who would they have gotten?
Right. No, exactly right. Yeah.
Bobby Wagner is back, so that's great. 1-year deal sounds about right. I think we'll go year to year with him. I hope he's, let's see how he plays next year. Like, I don't put a time limit on someone like that. I know how he's going to keep his body in shape. I know how he works. Players like that can kind of play as long as they want, even if it becomes at a reduced role at a later date. This year, it does appear like, that he's still going to be a prominent player on the team, albeit if Jordan McGee can stay healthy this year and they can kind of work him in, maybe limit the exposure to Wagner to the amount of snaps that he has, maybe keep him fresh for later in the season, that would be a win too. So hopefully McGee has a different year from a health perspective and can be brought along by Wagner to eventually be his replacement.
I would say this about Wagner too, and I don't want to make this a legitimate connection, but dude's getting his master's down at Howard. Like, he wasn't going anywhere. Like, I didn't think he was going anywhere. He was working on that during the season. So I thought the connection here was a little bit even beyond, beyond on the field, off the field as well. So for me, I was like, he's going to stick around. I'm not too worried about that. It was nice to see it 1 year, $10 million, I think, with incentives if he gets there. Not surprised here. It seems like he liked it. And I think it's really important to just point this out. He and Jaden Daniels have a connection. Like, they seem to really like the big brother, little brother connection thing happening last year. That makes veterans like Wagner, makes them want to kind of keep playing again. So I'm not surprised he's coming back, and I'm with you. Hopefully they kind of have their middle linebacker in waiting this season so they don't have to worry about it in case he takes a big step back or doesn't want to come back next year.
He signed here initially because of relationships. He wanted to play for Quinn and Witt. I don't think it hurt that Magic Johnson was part of this ownership group, that he has building a relationship with this ownership group. He's getting a master's here locally. I remember thinking at the time, I'm like, is he coming here to learn how to be a coach? That maybe that's his transition, that he wants to learn from Quinn and Witt. He's going to play for them, and then he's eventually either going to, I've seen this a million times, join their staff or something like that. But now, after spending a year, watching, it looks like actually he's more interested in going the Magic route, which is he wants to become kind of a business entrepreneur. And I think that's part of this too. It's the relationship part of this. I agree. But that's not why he's here. I think he loves to play football. And he does have a really good relationship with the locker room. But there are other reasons why he was here. And I think we found that they're helping him get to the other side when he's good and ready for it. And for now, we need him on the field. So that's the good news.
And we see this all the time with players, that even though he was basically a career Seahawk, played with the Rams for a cup of coffee there, we see this all the time in football. Whatever guy's last stop is, they actually tend to stay there often. I'm not saying it happens all the time, but a lot of the times they do like to stay. So I'm sure this ownership group is also going, hey, you can move back to the West Coast, but we want to keep you in the fold if you want to be involved with some new businesses or you want our ideas for any of that stuff. I'm sure they're keeping him in the fold. And they're also probably behind the scenes going, hey, it doesn't hurt that we've got this whole RFK thing coming. Does he have some business ideas, or does he want to be involved with some of this? Probably not the worst thing to have him involved on that side of things as well.
No. The other one they did yesterday was they re-signed Zane Gonzalez, so they got one kicker back at a low rate. I would still... I believe there will be competition this summer, and I don't know whether it will come via the draft or not. So I think it's very possible they use a late round pick on a kicker this year. And I do believe that they'll probably, if that doesn't happen, they'll bring in competition for him, and we'll see how it goes. I doubt this is fully guaranteed, but I saw the price point. It's very, very low. So I just think they've got somebody in camp right now. Let's see what happens in the draft. I have a feeling that a kicker could be a pick with a late pick this year, and they bring that person in to compete with Zane Gonzalez. We'll see.
Yeah, agreed. This seems to be move 1 of 2 for the kicking for the kicking throughout the summer. They're bringing someone else in for sure.
100%. And then the last one for before this weekend goes, I'm waiting to see if Jeremy Boone, they've signed 2 of their own guys. They're going to have to get some more. I think 2 of the receivers from last year will be back, whether it's Noah Brown, Zacchaeus, maybe Crowder. I doubt Diami, but who knows? I think that's going to happen. But this one is the one that's kind of hanging out there that seems obvious. And I would expect, unless they think they're going to land the safety from San Francisco, who all of a sudden is available, unless they think they're going to land him, I think they're going to bring Chin back. I thought he performed really well in this defense as a hybrid in the box linebacker. I think he has some liabilities in coverage, specifically with tight ends. So he's certainly not the perfect player, but I think he's a very good fit. He plays with the speed and ferocity that they like here. Very well liked in the locker room. And unless there is a quote unquote better option in their mind, I expect him to be signed. If they don't by Monday, they might be aiming for somebody else, but I do expect Chin to be back. But if they don't, I think it'll be very telling that they didn't.
No, agree 100% here. I'm with you. Is Chin a perfect player? No, but I thought he played pretty well. And when you're talking about putting your best players out on the field in certain situations, Chin was out there more often than not, in all scenarios. Yes. And so I'm with you. If they don't re-sign him, it tells me that they're looking in another direction. And who that is, I don't know. But it does tell me that they are looking in a different direction.
Yes. All right. Let me take a quick break. We'll get back into some of the targets of interest when the tampering period starts on Monday. Bram wants to show ESPN 630, the Sports Capital. All right, welcome back. By popular demand, football, everybody. It's just going to be football, guys. All right. Don't talk about Shorzy. All right.
No, I will say this before you even jump into that. People, I think, were very specific with you and said when you start with football, they don't mind the other chatter. It's just when you start with football that's when they're all in.
I'm going to spend the last few minutes of this show talking about the feedback and where I've landed on going with the feedback, and considering your the producer, I should end this show. We do need to have a conversation about it. Anyway, all right, let's see here. Okay, targets of interest starting next week. Wide receiver, they're not done. Debo is in, but they're going to sign other people. At least one other person, in my opinion, and I felt that way the whole time. The 3 names that pop up for me in no specific order are Darius Slayton, now Cooper Kupp, that if you don't have to trade for him and he gets through the weekend and they just release him, or Chris Godwin. Godwin's price point, I think, is going to be too high. I think the reason why he didn't sign with Tampa yet is he's going to hit the open market, and it's going to be for a big number. And it might be the biggest number of any of the free agent receivers that are out there. Longest term, biggest number. Therefore, I think that's why he's going to be off the table. I'm not adding DK Metcalf here because I think he's going to be traded over the weekend. He's too young. He's too good. He's going to get traded. It's going to be for a massive deal. We already made our trade. So I just don't believe that DK Metcalf's going to end up here. The targets of interest for me realistically then are Slayton and Kupp. And Devontae Adams dependent. I feel like Adams is going to follow his guy somewhere. That's what I think is going to happen. I don't think he's coming here. But if you could convince him, you convinced me. If you could convince him for a year or two to come at a reasonable rate to be the number, the other outside receiver of Debo and Terry, I'm actually down for that. I just don't think the number is going to be low enough to warrant wanting to do it. I think it's going to be too high. I think he's going to follow Rodgers wherever he goes. That's what I think is going to happen. So I'm kind of left him off of the board of I just don't expect it to happen. To me, it's Slayton or Kupp, and I would take either one of them if the price is right.
I'm with you on Slayton, too. I mean, he always torched this team, so I wouldn't be mad to have him, especially within the division, and be familiar. On Adams, too, though, have we really, kind of broken down? Is Adams okay going back to Vegas if that's where Aaron Rodgers signs? See,
that's what I think actually is what's going to happen. I think they're going to both go back to Vegas. I know, I'm reading all this reporting about the Giants are hot and heavy to get him. They are so desperate. They reek of desperation. Their Ron a few years ago when he got Wentz, where he called everybody, they tried to get Stafford. They got stood up by him. Rodgers, I think, is using them. I 100%. But you think he wants to stay in New York and deal with that media again on what he knows is a bad team, on a staff that, not unlike with Saleh, is going to get fired if they don't win? No, of course not. Go play for Pete Carroll. Be a bridge quarterback for them. Be in a market that's not going to criticize you constantly. Bring your guy Adams back with you. That's what I actually think will happen.
See, but I still don't know if I quite believe that Adams wants to go back there. I'm not saying he has hard feelings for them, but at the same time, I don't know. There's something weird to me with Adams where don't you just want to win? Because I look at that division. I look at that division and I don't think
he left because they did his guy. Because they got rid of Carr. That's why he left. He went there because of Carr. Once they got rid of Carr, he was pissed. And they didn't replace him. No,
that's fair. I'm just saying, it's all I'm saying is it's rare that the old trade happens and then a guy goes back to where he's from. And that's why I'm just not quite buying them as a package deal to Vegas. That's all I'm pointing out.
All right. Other targets of interest for Washington. Defensive end, obviously. All of the sudden, that market looks very different with Joey Bosa free and clear, and now Trey Hendrickson up and available to be traded for. He's my number one. I'd love Myles Garrett, okay? Everybody would. That's too complicated right now. Cleveland's apparently not even engaging in trade talks with anybody. So you got to go with what your options are. Hendrickson's available. The price point for him, I'm guessing, would not be what it would be like for Myles Garrett. You are going to have to pay him, but I'm okay with that. Go ahead, stretch him out for the next 3-4 years. You are going to move off of some salary with John Allen. You do have a lot of cap room. You can restructure McLaurin. And you need this very badly. So that's my first choice. But I think there's other teams are going to be looking at him. So that may or may not happen. That's my first choice for it to happen. If they don't get him, and we're going to know by Monday, because I think he's going to be dealt. I don't think he's going to be released, and I think he's going to be dealt. The people who are available outside of Bosa now are hard to kind of picture wanting to pay the price to get them. But there is a lot of people writing Josh Sweat to the Commanders. And I think it's just based on need, that they know that Washington has the cap room and need a defensive end. And I would say that Sweat is a above average player. I think he's a very good player. We've seen him a million times over the last few years. I don't think he's a top tier one. And I'd want to know what price point he wants. I would prefer Hendrickson, who I think is a game-changing type of player, but I do buy the smoke of it. Some of it to me is just people trying to be logical and looking and going, this team is going to get somebody like this. I don't think they are, but a lot of people are writing it. So I guess it's possible.
Well, this team has to look to upgrade at that position. Sweat would be a very clear upgrade. I think we all know that if Peters goes bargain bin shopping here, it's not going to go over well. And like I said, we looked at the roster last year, and you and I, we would say it throughout the year of the defense was a house of cards. If somebody was going down, they didn't have the players to replace them at the same level because, the roster was in such shambles after the Rivera era that there was no depth anywhere, essentially. So I'm not surprised they're linked to Sweat. Will they actually, get him at a good enough price? I doubt it. This screams to me one of the free agents of he's above average, but you're gonna have to pay him way more money than he's worth, and that's
Yes.
what always makes me a little cautious here. Color me a part of the Hassan Reddick team. Like, I think you can get him pretty cheap too. I don't know. He's definitely not the only move you're gonna make, but I'm a part of that where I think you could get him cheap as well. Like, I think you could get him on an incentive type deal, and maybe he wants to come play here. So I like Sweat a lot. I just think I don't know if Adam Peters is in the business of handing that much money to a player of that caliber, is what I'm getting at.
I like Hassan Reddick. I didn't like what he did a year ago, but I like Hassan Reddick. I don't think he's an edge rusher. I think he's a pass rusher.
Okay.
I like Azeez Ojulari, but I think he's very similar. I think he's a very, very good adept pass rusher. He's a specialist to me. I think we could re-sign Dante Fowler and it fills that role, honestly, but we need a sturdier edge. Sweat does represent that. Is he a top tier one? No, Hendrickson is. So I'm willing to pay the price to get Hendrickson because I think it's a difference-making one. Sweat, you could get off the open market, but you are going to pay what I think is end up being probably more than probably what he really should get, in my opinion. And I think that's where the line is going to be for this group, that they don't want to overpay anybody. And I don't think they want to start with their first quote unquote overpayment to a player everybody in the locker room knows probably shouldn't have been overpaid. Sure. The other name I would watch is Malcolm Kuntz from the Raiders. He's had a lot of injuries the last couple of years. He was very good a couple of years ago when the Raiders defense started to surge at the end of the year and Antonio Pierce got the job for next year, was because their defense really surged at the end of the year. He was a big part of that. So was their secondary, but he was a big part of that. Then he got injured. He missed a lot of time. So this is one of those, I'd have to know more about where he is physically because he hasn't played much. I think his number is going to be kind of low. He's one to watch for me. It might be a bargain boon type of player for them.
No, I wouldn't mind one of those names too, like where maybe you sign 2 or 3 of these guys and you hope you can supplement them. The guys that do get injured a lot, that one of them slots in or they don't get as hurt because their usage isn't going to be as much. I wouldn't be shocked if we were talking about 3 of them going into next week, essentially. I'm not going to be surprised at all.
All right. Offensive line. Clearly that needs to be dealt with here. You have to make a choice. Ronnie Stanley's the best tackle available. He's up, in his 30s now. For a year or two, that's probably the right move. Is someone going to give him a 5-year deal? We are not. So that will depend on market conditions. I'm also not in love with it, but I do think that they need to upgrade here. This is why I think if they can get their edge rush settled with a premier player where they feel really good about it, then I think they can go heavy offensive line in the draft and try to build that way. And if they have to bridge again next year and go get a veteran to come in to fill it out when Cosme hopefully is back and healthy again, then I think you can do that. So I don't think we're going to do a lot here other than maybe there's an interior offensive lineman that they bring in that's a veteran, that not unlike Allegretti, that they look at as someone who could be a spot starter for them for as long as they need until Cosme comes back. I would be looking for that next week, and it won't be a splashy signing, but it will be an important one. They had no depth behind their offensive line last year. Allegretti's either going to be the left guard or the right guard, depending on what happens in the draft and what happens in free agency. But bare minimum, they have to get help on the interior offensive line and potentially another starter because Cosme's probably not ready week 1. So I expect that to happen here.
Yeah, no, they've got to sign at least one professional is what I've kind of left it out to be. They need a professional lineman, whether it's interior or a tackle. With Stanley, too, I'm always weary of, even if tackles are a little bit older, if the team that they're coming from aren't in a rush to sign them, that always kind of leaves you to be a little bit cautionary that if a team like that isn't keeping Stanley, what's up with that? Or do they not believe in that? So that always is a little bit of a red flag, but this is the position that you're in. You might need to sign him anyways.
Last spot is tight end. I think Zach Ertz is coming back. I expect him to sign a 1-year deal, but he hasn't yet. They signed Wagner. They haven't yet. And maybe by the time you hear this today or tomorrow, they do. So that I know is very possible could happen. If it doesn't, then the 2 that are now out there, Mike Gesicki, who had a really good year with Cincinnati as a top tier receiving tight end, and Evan Engram, who just got released by Jacksonville, former Giant. Those are options, I think, for them. I don't know what the price point is for either. I don't think Gesicki's would be very high. See what Engram's is. It might be a little more than you might want to spend for that position. But those, to me, are fail-safes if Ertz doesn't come back. The other one is, it sounds like John Bates has a market. And that's a little unfortunate because I actually thought I was saying in December I'd re-sign him because I think he fills a role you need. You're not going to get somebody better than him. He knows the offense. Just bring him back. And they didn't, and he got to free agency, and now it looks like he's got a bit of a market. So this could be a weird week for tight end, specifically if Ertz doesn't re-sign, which I can't imagine he's going anywhere else. But let's see what happens here.
I think Ertz also, he did kind of do I mean this in a good way, the kind of unprofessional thing at the end of the year last year where he was like, I love playing football again. I love this organization. I want to come back, which I call that unprofessional because you usually want to negotiate a little bit, and he didn't do that. He was straight up like, I want to be back here. I want to play with Jaden Daniels. He basically just said, like, it renewed his love for football.
Yeah.
I expect him to be back. Like, I don't know how you don't bring him back. And at the same time as well, like, we didn't see enough of Ben Sinnott last year. So I think the team is also saying, let's bring Ertz back. Hope Sinnott gets, a little bit more, a couple more snaps, and we'll see if he can kind of take the reins. And then if not, they go in a different direction. I'm with you with Bates. Like, I was reading the reporting earlier this week of like blocking tight ends have a demand, and he's one of the better ones. And so I'm not going to be surprised if Bates doesn't come back either with what I was reading.
I hope they bring him back. With Sinnott, it's a big year for him. A really big year for him.
Yep.
I think they have to have Ertz back because he's not ready to assume that
Correct.
role. So it's just an enormous year for Ben Sinnott in his career. All right, let me take a quick break. Bram and Callow show is at 6:30, the Sports Capital. All right, let me spend a few minutes with where we started yesterday, which was Ryan on Twitter. I won't say his last name. Sent me a tweet and basically said, when we started talking about the NBA and the face of the league stuff that was going on, that he tunes out, and that just in general, and he said it nicely, I listen to you for football and the Commanders. And yeah, I get it. I understand why. And you know what? I like talking about that more than anything anyway, but we have other interests and we do other things here. And when I had a 3-hour show, that would be, I'm not talking about one thing for 3 hours. That's crazy.
Correct.
So now that we don't, so I've been selective about the other things that I bring up, and mainly this is football. But I thought he made a point, and it's something I've thought about anyway. Should this just be a football-centric show? And so I asked that question. I got a lot of responses in a variety of different ways, which I thought was interesting. Somebody reached out to me on LinkedIn and said, keep it to football. I got a lot of emails through Empire Media. They got my email, which is fine. They got my email that way. Most of them said, keep it to football. On Twitter, I got a lot of responses that were like, mainly keep it to football. But then most people also acknowledged, we don't mind if you talk about the caps because we like that.
I got that too.
If you do spend, just the last 5 minutes of the show or something like that on it, we're okay with that. So I've landed on the show needs to be football. And then we'll talk about the other stuff at the end. The question is, do I even leave the stuff at the end in the podcast or just make it radio only? So what do you think about that?
I think you leave it in. You let people, whether they want to keep listening or not, you make it their choice. I don't think it falls on you to cut something at the end of a show if someone can't X out of their podcast. You know what I mean? So that's where I've landed on it. And I had a few people DM me as well, kind of saying the same thing of, we want you to talk about those other things. We do listen to it for football, but don't cut it either. Was like the adamant messages that I got was don't stop talking about that. If we kind of
brand segment 3, which is for radio purposes, because the reason why we're still doing it in segments is because it does air on the radio first before the podcast goes out. Yeah. So if that wasn't happening, I would just do the podcast and just end it whenever I felt like ending it. But that's why it's formatted this way. And I don't want that to end. Don't get the wrong idea. I don't want that to end. Like, I'd like to keep it arrow, but we'll keep it formatted that way. So you're saying keep it together, but like, I agree with, all right, so then here's the other question. Let's say we hit the summer. There's just literally nothing going on in football because everybody's off. We're going to talk about something else. Do I even upload a podcast that day?
Yes. I still say, like, look, I help with, producing your show, producing my own show, right? I say you do have to leave it a little bit to the listeners too. If they don't want to listen to the show that day, they don't have to. Like, I'm always all about.
If you're saying to me, though, I don't want to hear you talk about MLB's All-Star game, but there's nothing else going on, and that's what we end up talking about, do I just do that for the radio and not even post it, is the question.
I think you do post it, because I think, sometimes there are layered jokes within this show that sometimes you've got to listen to some of the, the episodes that maybe you don't want to listen to. Like, I always love our comment section of people screaming at you to stop saying, "Hey, babies." But there's always one person that chimes in and goes, "Real ones know that he's been doing it for 5 years. And if you don't know about it, that's on you." Like, I don't know. I think you have to reward the people that want to listen to every show. That's how I feel. Like, reward me for knowing about some of the details. That's how I always feel about anything that I watch.
So then how's this for now? The object will be, and it's kind of this way anyway, the first 30 to 40 minutes will be football, whether it's Commanders or NFL or a combination of the two. The last segment will be whatever we end up doing, Caps, Nats, Orioles, stupid story, media stuff I like, Shoresy, whatever it may be, right? Sure. We'll do it that way, and I'll leave it all in. And you'll know that the end of the podcast is that. And for those that like that, you can go to that. And maybe we'll even just call it something. This is the segment nobody likes.
I mean, people do it all the time. It's the leftovers. It's the wrap up. It's whatever you want to call it. Like, okay. I think, and I'm of the belief, like, you and I, like, grew up in a different radio era than it is now. Like, I grew up listening to Don and Mike and Stern and all of those guys, where even when they were sports shows, the best segments were not about sports a lot of the time. I agree. I think you need to leave that in there, because I'm sorry, like, I like a little personality with my sports talk. So
I agree. I'm not a robot. I'm not a robot. I've never been that way. I like other things. And if I don't get to talk about them, it makes this not fun to me. Yeah. So, yeah. But the audience chooses what you are. And I am fully respectful of that, is the way I would put this. That's why I said, like, I'm taking this seriously and I'll listen to you. And I appreciated all the feedback. And the majority of it was, we do listen to you for football, respectfully. And I'm like, I agree with that. I'm the voice of the team. I know why you're listening to me. And it's the one thing I know the most about. But there are other things I like to talk about. And we'll leave it there at the end. And we'll make a decision, because this won't be next week, because free agency is starting. Once the draft is over and nothing's going on, we're going to have to make some content choices about, do we put the podcast out? And maybe we can talk about it then. Sure. No, 100% agree. But I think the way it's laid out right now, I don't think you need to create any extra work for yourself either. Just the format of the show stays the same. I think that's where we're at. Thank you to everybody who responded. I appreciated that, because I gave you no way to actually do it, and you found ways to find me. So I appreciated all of that. All right, real quick. Caps get Detroit tonight, Kraken Sunday. What's their weekend like? All right, so first off, before we even get into the games, the trade deadline happens this afternoon. So any moves that they make, this is the roster that they're going to move forward with. And so let me just lay this out. They have been basically in no chatter from what I have heard, what I've read, everything from all facets from what I know about the team. They have not been in any talks for anything. So either they're very, very, very quiet, or they are legitimately moving forward with we love this locker room so much that we're not going to try to screw anything up. And I think there's a tinge of, we got the stud Ryan Leonard on the way. Once Boston College's season is over with, he's probably going to insert into the lineup. I will make an argument here for one name that, if you can pry him from his respective team, that I would love to have, and it is Brad Marchand. He is they haven't said he's on the market, but the Bruins are hitting the reset button. You and I have talked about him over the years, how teams absolutely hate to play against him. We hate to play against him. All I'm going to throw out there is Brad Marchand, Tom Wilson, Ryan Leonard, all on the same roster. That's a bitch of a roster. There's no other way to say it. Have one of those dudes out there on the ice at all times. Most hated line in the history of the NHL. I mean, that'd be insane if they played on the same line. I don't think that would happen, but if it did, we'd have to call them the pest line or something, because you'd hate them. I'm also of the argument here, kind of how you landed in the middle of the Commanders season. They are in the middle of something very, very special. Ovechkin can break the record, and they might win a Stanley Cup at the same time. I am very privy to not mortgage the future for these runs, but I think this is a case where you have to kick the tires a little bit on some big names. They have more prospects than they've ever had. This was the Lattimore thing last year. When I said it, I'm like, I'm sorry. I know it's ahead of schedule, and I know it's weird and all, but they're having a special season. Go help them try to win.
And I'm landing on that. Like, I'm not saying you got to trade everything for something, but make a move here. I think this season's turning out to be really, really special in the grand pantheon of the NHL. Make a major move. Like, make a splash here. You don't need a goaltender either. Like, you don't need to mortgage it for that. Make a move here is my argument. On for this weekend, they're finally going to get these teams that were really, really desperate for the last couple weeks not be desperate. The Red Wings, they're on the cusp of a wild card spot. Stevie Yzerman is terrible as a GM, so he's probably not going to make a move this afternoon. So they're going to be downtrodden. I expect the Caps to win big tonight against the Red Wings. I think they wiped the floor with them, and the Red Wings played last night too, so back-to-back for them. Kraken, same thing. They started blowing up the team this week, started making a bunch of major trades. They should win. I'm looking at 4 points this weekend, and I'm pretty confident in both of them.
All right, everybody. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you on Monday. Bram Show, ESPN 630, the Sportscast.